I bought an apartment during a market slump, $30,000 below what others had paid for the same layout. I had just finished moving in when Linda Carver, the neighbor across the hall, stormed over. Same unit, same building, yet you paid $30,000 less than we did. You need to make up the difference. I froze for a second. She took it as fear and raised her voice. If you had the guts to snap it up cheap, you'd better be ready to compensate the rest of us. Otherwise, don't expect to live here in peace. I looked at her, so self-righteous it was almost absurd, and I laughed. I had just been discharged from a psychiatric hospital. Threatened me? If anyone wasn't going to live in peace, it was her. I stared at the middle-aged woman with tight curls who had just barged through my door, demanding I pay her $30,000 to make up the difference. All the excitement of finally buying a place vanished. Ma'am, volatility in housing prices is just how the market works, I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. The previous owner needed a quick sale, and I happened to catch it. That has nothing to do with you. She stepped closer, her voice turning sharp. How does it have nothing to do with me? Same layout, same building, so why did you pay $30,000 less than I did? Annoyance simmered under my skin. I remembered what the doctor told me when I was discharged. When conflict comes up, take a deep breath first, then reason it out. I took a slow breath. For you, the market was at its peak when you bought your unit. When I bought mine, prices had dropped. That's not on me. If we follow your logic, then if prices go up another $50,000 next year, are you going to pay me the difference? She planted her hands on her hips. Don't try to confuse me with all that nonsense. We live on the same floor. How can you feel okay taking advantage like that? My son's getting married soon. We need the money. You bought it cheap, so you make up the difference. If you don't fix this, don't expect to live here in peace. I let out a short laugh, irritation bubbling over before I could respond. She suddenly lunged toward my luggage, reaching straight for my bag. Where's the money? Hand it over. $30,000 and not a cent less. A flash of anger shot through me. How could someone be this unreasonable? I was just about to pull out my phone and dial 911. The moment she saw what I was doing, she spun around and headed back to her unit. As she left, she tossed over her shoulder. If you don't pay up, we'll see how long you last here. I gave a cold laugh and ignored her, shutting the door behind me. That afternoon, I went downstairs to Harper's corner store to pick up some essentials. Denise Harper, the owner in her 50s, scanned me up and down before asking, "You just moved in? 6th floor?" I nodded. She glanced outside, then lowered her voice. Linda Carver from 601 just posted in the resident group chat saying you bought the place to run some kind of shady business. I froze. What? She sighed. You got that apartment cheap. Their family can't accept it. She pulled up the chat and showed me. The messages were filthy. Linda Carver. At everyone. What do you reckon the woman who just moved into the 6th floor does for a living? I've lived for over 50 years. I know how to read people. What decent young woman lives alone in a place that expensive? You all know what that means. Now that you say it, yeah, that's suspicious. Where would such a young girl get that kind of money? Those kinds of gigs out there pay fast. Don't let her ruin the atmosphere of this place. Heard she's not bad looking? That makes it even more likely. Anyone got her contact? Just curious? Haha, not gonna do anything. Denise shook her head. They drove out the last person who lived in your unit the same way. Even calling the police didn't help. They won't cross the line. They just make your life miserable every single day. As she handed me my things, I asked her to add me to the group chat. Sweetheart, just between us, if you can tolerate it, then tolerate it. Otherwise, leave as soon as you can. I took my things from her, holding back my irritation, and thanked her. Well, I wasn't afraid. I had just spent my entire savings on that apartment. Leave? I let out a silent, cold laugh. It was the first time I'd ever heard of someone trying to force a psychiatric patient out of her own home. When I got back upstairs, I saw a plastic bag hanging from my doorknob. Inside was a dead rat. There was a note in the bag. This is the first time. Next time it'll be alive. I scoffed, tied the bag shut, and tossed it right back at Linda's door. I'd dealt with plenty of rats before. At 11 that night, I had just fallen asleep when the sound of a power drill jolted me awake. It was coming from across the hall, Unit 601. The drilling stopped, only to be replaced by the pounding of a hammer. Thud, thud. The vibration made the glass of water on my nightstand tremble. When I was discharged, Dr. Adrian Pike had repeatedly warned me to maintain good sleep. Now that I'd been woken up like this, a sharp headache started to build. Suppressing my anger, I opened the door. Their place was brightly lit. Linda's husband, Carl Carver, was hammering nails into the wall. Linda stood in the middle of the living room, casually snacking on chips and directing him. I knocked on her doorframe. She turned and saw me, her eyes lighting up like she'd been waiting for this. "It's almost midnight," I said, frowning. "Can you continue this tomorrow? You're keeping the whole floor awake." She smiled, then called over her shoulder. "Hey Carl, she says we're disturbing the whole building." Carl didn't respond. Linda turned back to me. "Listen, sweetheart, I'm not trying to make things difficult for you. If you won't pay that $30,000 and my son still has a wedding to pay for, then we'll just have to save money ourselves. Think of it as making up for what we didn't get from you. If it's noisy, that's your problem. Deal with it." She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Or pay up, and we stop immediately. We'll even hire the best contractors and renovate everything quietly for you. How does that sound?" Looking at her utterly self-righteous face, I laughed. Did she really think I was some easy target? I pulled out my phone. "Then I'll call the police." Linda spat a piece of a chip straight at my face and sneered. "Go ahead. I'll be waiting." When the police arrived, Linda suddenly clutched her chest and collapsed into the hallway, her face pale. She pointed at me, gasping for breath. "It's her. She was banging on our door in the middle of the night, pounding on it for minutes. When I opened it, she was glaring at me like a lunatic. I have a heart condition. I can't handle that kind of shock." Carl rushed out and without warning kicked me hard in the stomach. "If anything happens to my wife, I'm not letting you off." Officer Ryan Keller tried to intervene, but it was too late. A sharp pain exploded in my abdomen, forcing me to double over. My vision flickered, going dark at the edges. Officer Keller was about to reprimand Carl, but Linda immediately grabbed onto the officer, crying, "Officer, you have to stand up for me. I'm a heart patient. I can't take being frightened like that." Officer Keller turned to look at me. My whole body trembled with anger, and my heart was racing. It was coming on. I startled myself and quickly took a deep breath. "Officer," I said through clenched teeth, "I have intermittent explosive disorder. It was diagnosed at a top hospital. I have the records at home and you can verify anytime. My doctor specifically warned me that a lack of sleep can trigger episodes. I came to knock on their door because they were renovating," I said, pointing at the time on my phone. "They've been at it since 11. Drilling, hammering, moving furniture. The whole building can hear it. I couldn't sleep, so I came to talk." Carl shot to his feet. What the hell are you talking about? We weren't renovating at all tonight. We went to bed early. You're the one who came banging on our door and scared my wife into a heart attack. That's why we turned the lights on. Lying on the floor, Linda let out a perfectly timed groan. Oh, my heart. Officer, they're setting me up, I argued, refusing to back down. Officer Keller looked at them, then at me. He stepped inside their unit to take a look. When he came back out, his expression was complicated. There's no sign of renovation in there, he said. Are you sure the drilling came from their place? Yes, I said firmly. But there's no drill in use, he replied. All their tools are put away. My stomach sank. Then it hit me. In the 20 minutes before the police arrived, they'd had more than enough time to hide everything. Carl looked at me with a smug grin, like there was nothing I could do. Officer Keller let out a sigh. Miss, I understand how you feel, but situations like this are best resolved through mediation. You're neighbors. You'll see each other every day. Letting things escalate won't do anyone any good. He gave my shoulder a firm pat. That's enough for tonight. All of you, take a step back and get some rest. Officer Keller then left. Linda pushed herself up off the floor and looked at me with satisfaction. So, the police are gone. What else have you got? I dug my nails into my palm, using the pain to keep the fury inside me from boiling over. She leaned against the doorframe, already cracking open a fresh bag of chips. I've lived here 8 years. You think I haven't dealt with troublemakers before? I can handle a dozen girls like you without breaking a photoshopping fake medical records? That's hilarious. She laughed out loud, then tossed a package from inside her apartment toward me. This yours? Don't thank me. I brought it up for you. It was the new outfit I had ordered. The packaging had been ripped open, and inside the clothes had been cut to shreds, leaving nothing but scraps of fabric. Linda clapped her hands, then stepped right onto the ruined clothes, laughing. I've already spoken to the delivery guy. From now on, all your packages will come to me first. If anything goes missing or gets damaged, don't blame me. Should have thought about that before buying your place so cheap and making us take the loss. Again and again, she pushed further. I stared at her, my gaze locked. She frowned and snapped. What are you looking at? My husband's right inside. Nothing, I said through clenched teeth, my voice low. Just reminding you of something. The doctor said people with my condition shouldn't be provoked. If I get triggered, I lose control. She let out a sharp laugh. Lose control? And what exactly are you going to do with those skinny arms? I could knock you flat with a single slap. I spoke softly. You can try. The price of triggering me isn't something you can afford. Freak, she snapped, slamming the door shut. She wasn't wrong. Something was wrong with me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have sent a grown man straight into the ICU during an episode. During the 2 years I spent in the psychiatric hospital, even the doctors didn't dare raise their voices at me. And now that I was out, I had to put up with this? I tamped my anger down and went back inside, splashing cold water on my face. Then I remembered that I hadn't taken my medication today. I had just stepped into the living room. Click. Everything went dark. I thought the power had gone out. Feeling my way through the darkness, I reached for my phone in the living room. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my knee. I had slammed into the edge of the table. Grimacing, I found my phone and turned on the flashlight, then walked over to the window. Outside, 2 figures stood on the balcony of Unit 601. Linda and Carl were standing on their balcony, looking straight at me. I saw Linda smile and wave. Beside her, Carl held a pair of pliers. They had flipped my breaker. The blood rushed to my head, my heartbeat accelerating. Again, I was really about to lose it. I hurried back inside, found my medication, and swallowed it. Then I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. The medicine started to take effect. My heartbeat slowly steadied, my limbs growing heavy. In this world, reason doesn't always matter. The doctor told me to avoid conflict. I had done everything I could tonight. Tomorrow it would be their turn to panic, because I was out of medication. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a drill. I reached for my phone. 6 a.m. I lay there for 3 seconds. The drilling didn't stop. It only got louder. I sat up, irritation rising uncontrollably. I went to the bathroom to wash my face. The person in the mirror looked terrible. My heart started racing again. I needed to get my meds. Stat. When I opened the door, a pile of garbage blocked the entrance. Dirty liquid had seeped through the gap under the door, soaking into the entry rug and emitting a sour stench. The door to 601 was shut, but faint laughter came from inside. I knew someone was watching through the peephole. I took a deep breath and said nothing. Squeezing past the pile of trash, I headed out. Getting the medication mattered more. Unfortunately, the nearest pharmacy didn't carry what I needed. When I got back and tried to unlock my door, the key wouldn't go in. I looked down at the keyhole. It was stuffed full with broken toothpicks jammed inside, packed tight. I crouched down and tried to pick them out with my fingers, but it was useless. Linda. It had to be them again. Anger surged through me. I stood up, took a deep breath, and forced it down. Then I made a call and got a locksmith to come over. It took Mike Donnelly half an hour to dismantle the lock and replace it with a new one. Who'd do something this nasty? Mike muttered while packing up his tools. Stuffing toothpicks in a lock? What kind of grudge is that? I paid him, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. Then I froze. Everything on the tables had been swept onto the floor. The kitchen was even worse. Every bottle, oil, salt, vinegar, had been poured out across the floor in a mess. I rushed into the bedroom. A wooden box lay shattered on the ground. In the middle of it was white powder, scattered everywhere, obviously kicked around. My mother's ash. When she passed, the funeral home had given me that urn. She had told me to keep it so I could look at it when I missed her. I stood in the doorway, staring at the powder. A sharp ringing filled my head. Then, nothing. The whole world went silent except for the abnormal pounding of my own heart. My temples throbbed. I walked over slowly and crouched down. I reached out, then pulled my hand back. I didn't dare touch it. That was my mom. I used to keep her on my nightstand and look at her every night before bed. Sometimes I would talk to her. Mom, I found a job today. Mom, I bought an apartment. Got it $30,000 below market. If she were still alive, she would have been so happy. Keeping her there made me feel like she was still with me. Now, there was nothing left. The pain in my chest was suffocating. Linda. The anger surged through my body, snapping the last thread of restraint. You pushed me to this. I don't start trouble, but if someone crosses me, I won't hold back. You destroyed the one thing I cared about most. You're going to pay for it. I walked into the living room, opened my toolbox, and pulled out a large wrench. I weighed it in my hand. Heavy.
I stood in the living room, opened my toolbox, and pulled out a large wrench. I weighed it in my hand. Heavy. For a moment, all I could see was the white powder scattered across the floor. My mother's ashes. My fingers tightened around the handle. Then my phone rang. The sound sliced through the rage. Dr. Adrian Pike. I stared at the screen. The call kept ringing. Finally, I answered. Did you take your medication? He asked immediately. I didn't speak. The silence told him everything. His voice became serious. Put down whatever you're holding. I looked at the wrench. How did you know? Because every time you stop answering incomplete sentences, something bad is about to happen. My breathing was uneven. Doctor. Yes, they destroyed my mother's ashes. Silence. Then a long sigh. Put the wrench down. They destroyed her. I know. They broke into my apartment. I know. They've been tormenting me for days. I know. My voice cracked. They scattered my mom all over the floor. The anger suddenly mixed with grief. I dropped onto the couch. The wrench slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a loud clang. Dr. Pike stayed on the line. Good. I buried my face in my hands. For the first time all day, I cried. Not because of Linda. Not because of Carl. Because my mother was gone. And now even the last thing she left behind had been taken from me. After 20 minutes, my breathing finally steadied. Dr. Pike spoke again. Do you want revenge? Yes. Then stop thinking like a patient. I frowned. What? Start thinking like a homeowner. I slowly lifted my head. What does that mean? It means stop reaching for the wrench and start collecting evidence. My eyes narrowed. The rage didn't disappear. It changed shape. Cooler. Sharper. More useful. I looked around my destroyed apartment. The broken lock. The garbage. The vandalized kitchen. The shattered urn. The torn packages. The dead rat. The power outage. The harassment messages. The false police report. And then I noticed something. Something I should have noticed immediately. Linda wasn't smart. Neither was Carl. People like that always got caught eventually. Because they loved showing off. I opened the resident group chat. Sure enough, Linda had been posting all morning. Complaining. Boasting. Playing victim. Then one photo caught my pulse slowed. I zoomed in. The picture showed Linda drinking coffee in her kitchen. Behind her was a window. And reflected in the glass. My apartment. My living room. My open front door. The photo timestamp was from 30 minutes earlier. The exact time I had been at the pharmacy. The exact time someone had trashed my home. I stared at it. Then smiled. For the first time since moving in. A real smile. Linda had just placed herself at the scene. I downloaded the image. Then another. And another. In one photo, Carl was standing beside her. In another, he was wearing the same boots that had left muddy prints across my kitchen floor. The idiots had documented everything themselves. I began taking pictures. Every room. Every footprint. Every broken object. Every trace of damage. Then I called Officer Ryan Keller. An hour later he arrived. His expression immediately changed when he stepped inside. The ruined apartment spoke for itself. The kitchen. The bedroom. The broken urn. Even he looked disturbed. Who did this? I handed him my phone. Remember how you told me to resolve things peacefully? He looked through the photos. The timestamps. The chat messages. The threats. The reflection. The footprints. His face grew darker with each swipe. Then I handed him one final piece. The invoice from the locksmith. Showing someone had tampered with my lock. Officer Keller stared at everything for a long moment. Then he looked toward Unit 601. Very slowly. He nodded. Don't leave town, he said. I blinked. I'm not planning to. Good. He pulled out his radio. Because I think your neighbors are about to have a very bad day. Across the hall, Linda's laughter suddenly stopped. The door of Unit 601 opened. And for the first time since I'd moved in, I saw fear on her face. Linda stepped into the hallway. The confidence she'd been wearing for days was gone. Officer Keller was no longer smiling politely. No longer talking about mediation. No longer treating this like a neighbor dispute. He walked straight toward her door. Mrs. Carver, we'd like to ask you a few questions. Linda forced a laugh. Questions? About what? Officer Keller held up his phone. The break-in. Her smile twitched. What break-in? The one that happened while the owner was away. Linda's eyes flickered toward me. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Carl appeared behind her. Officer, this is ridiculous. Is it? Keller asked. He showed them the photograph. The reflection. The timestamp. The open door. Carl's face changed instantly. Just for a second. But it was enough. Enough for everyone to see. We can explain that, Linda said quickly. Please do. We were just checking on her apartment. Through a locked door? Linda froze. Officer Keller's expression hardened. Then another officer emerged from the stairwell. And another. Apparently Keller hadn't come alone this time. My lips curled upward. Linda noticed. Her face immediately twisted. This psycho is setting us up. She pointed at me. She's been threatening us. Officer Keller looked unimpressed. Threatening you how? Linda opened her mouth. Then closed it. Because she had nothing. Meanwhile, I had photographs. Chat messages. Witnesses. The locksmith. The damaged property. And most importantly, motive. $30,000. Everyone in the building knew she'd been obsessed with it. Keller turned to the other officers. Document everything. The officers entered my apartment. Taking pictures. Recording damage. Bagging evidence. The more they found, the paler Linda became. Then came the fatal blow. One of the officers emerged from my bedroom holding something in an evidence bag. A broken toothpick. Covered in fingerprints. Found it inside the lock mechanism. Carl's face went white. I remembered watching him jam the toothpicks into my keyhole from the peephole camera. The camera I'd installed immediately after the dead rat incident. A camera neither of them had noticed. I hadn't even mentioned it yet. Because I was saving it. Officer Keller looked at me. Anything else? I unlocked my phone. Then pressed play. The hallway footage appeared. Carl. Clear as day. Stuffing toothpicks into my lock. Looking around. Then walking away. The hallway fell silent. Linda stared at the screen. Carl stared at the screen. The officers stared at Carl. Carl looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Officer Keller slowly pocketed the phone after reviewing the footage. Mr. Carver. Carl didn't answer. Turn around. Linda shrieked. Wait. Nobody listened. The handcuffs clicked shut. For the first time in days, I slept well that night. The arrest spread through the building like wildfire. Residents who had spent days mocking me suddenly became very quiet. The group chat exploded. People began deleting messages. Unfortunately for them, screenshots last forever. By the next morning, several residents had received visits from detectives. Turns out publicly accusing someone of prostitution, criminal activity, and various other fabricated nonsense leaves a pretty useful paper trail, especially when it's written down. One by one, people started apologizing. I ignored every single message. A week later, the Homeowners Association held an emergency meeting. The room was packed. Linda sat in the front row.
Carl, sit beside her.
Both looked exhausted. Neither looked smug anymore. The association president cleared his throat. We have reviewed extensive evidence regarding harassment of a resident. He didn't even say my name. He didn't need to. Everyone knew. The board has voted unanimously. He looked directly at Linda. Your family is hereby fined for property damage, harassment, tampering with utilities, and repeated violations of community regulations. Linda's face went pale. Then came the number. $42,000. The room erupted. Linda nearly fell out of her chair. $42,000. The president wasn't finished. Additionally, legal proceedings remain ongoing. Carl buried his face in his hands. I almost laughed. They had spent weeks demanding $30,000 from me. Now they owed more than they had ever tried to steal. And it was only the beginning, because after the meeting ended, another woman approached me. Then another. Then another. Former residents. People who had moved away. People who had suffered exactly what I had suffered. The dead rats. The vandalism. The harassment. The threats. Linda had done it for years. Most people simply left. Now, they wanted statements. Evidence. Testimony. The case grew larger every day. And with every new witness, Linda's future became darker. Standing in the parking lot afterward, she finally snapped. This is your fault. She lunged toward me. Before she could reach me, 3 people stepped between us. Officer Keller, the association president, and Harper from the corner store. Harper folded her arms. You know, Linda. Linda froze. For years you said everyone else was the problem. The old woman smiled. Looks like the problem was you. The parking lot erupted in laughter. Linda's face turned crimson. And for the first time since I'd met her, she had absolutely nothing to say. Linda's humiliation should have ended there. It didn't. People like Linda never knew when to stop. 3 days later, I was sitting in my apartment sorting through insurance paperwork when my phone buzzed. Officer Keller, are you home? Yes. Stay there. Something in his voice made me sit up. What happened? A pause. Then, your neighbor just made the biggest mistake of her life. 20 minutes later, I found out why. A police cruiser pulled into the complex. Then another. Then a third. Residents began gathering near the entrance. Whispers spread through the crowd. I stepped onto my balcony and looked down. 2 officers were escorting Carl out of the building. In handcuffs. Again. This time, he looked terrified. Not angry. Terrified. Linda was screaming. Actually screaming. What do you mean fraud? One of the detectives ignored her. We have bank records. What bank records? The ones your family probably shouldn't have touched. My eyes narrowed. Interesting. Very interesting. An hour later, Harper filled me in. Apparently, the investigation into my case had uncovered something unexpected. When detectives started examining the Carvers' finances, they found that Carl and Linda had been collecting money from multiple residents for years. Fake renovation funds. Fake maintenance fees. Fake emergency assessments. Thousands here. Thousands there. Most people never questioned it. The amounts were small enough to avoid attention. Over 8 years? Not so small anymore. The total had crossed 6 figures. And once detectives started digging, things got worse. Much worse. Because the money wasn't there. It had vanished. Spent. Linda's precious son's wedding suddenly made a lot more sense. A week later, the news spread through the building. The wedding had been cancelled. Not postponed. Cancelled. The venue dropped them. The caterers demanded payment up front. The florist refused to proceed. Everything collapsed at once. Apparently, no one wanted to be associated with a family under criminal investigation. I almost felt bad for the son. Almost. Then I remembered the group chat. The messages. The insults. The fact that he'd laughed along with his parents. My sympathy disappeared immediately. The real disaster arrived during the civil lawsuit. Former residents kept appearing. One after another. Each carrying evidence. Photos. Messages. Repair bills. Police reports. Witness statements. 8 years of victims. 8 years of bullying. 8 years of people Linda thought she had successfully chased away. Now, they were all back. And they were furious. I attended the first hearing. Linda still tried acting confident. She entered the courtroom wearing expensive jewelry and a bright smile. The smile lasted 11 minutes. Then the judge started reading evidence. By lunchtime, she looked sick. By afternoon, she looked like she might faint. By the end of the day, she was crying. Not fake crying. Real crying. The kind that comes when someone realizes consequences are actually real. The judge wasn't impressed. Neither was anyone else. The building changed after that. The resident chat became quiet. Strangely polite. Nobody spread rumors anymore. Nobody harassed newcomers. Nobody touched anyone's packages. Funny how quickly people learn manners when they realize actions have consequences. One evening I was carrying groceries upstairs when Harper stopped me. You know, she said. What? You've done everyone a favor. I laughed. I didn't do anything. Harper snorted. You stayed. That shut me up. Because she was right. Everyone else had left. I hadn't. Not because I was brave. Not because I was strong. Mostly because I was stubborn. Harper smiled. Sometimes that's enough. 6 months later, Unit 6011 went on the market. The Carvers had lost everything. The legal judgments, the fines, the lawsuits, the criminal charges, the attorney fees, the wedding deposits, the missing money. It all added up. Eventually, they couldn't keep the apartment. The listing sat online for weeks, then months. Nobody wanted it. The entire neighborhood knew exactly who had lived there. Finally, it sold. Far below market value. Very far below market value. When I saw the final number, I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. The Carvers lost more money on that sale alone than the $30,000 they'd spent 2 years obsessing over. Their greed had cost them nearly everything. As the moving truck pulled away, Linda looked up one last time. Our eyes met across the parking lot. She looked older, smaller, defeated. I simply nodded, then turned around and went back inside. Because unlike Linda, I finally had peace. And unlike her, I was home. Years passed. After the lawsuits, the fines, and the forced sale of Unit 601, the Carvers disappeared from my life. For a while, I heard occasional rumors. Carl had trouble finding work. Their son moved across the country and stopped taking their calls. The marriage, which had survived years of tormenting other people, somehow couldn't survive consequences. Eventually Linda and Carl divorced. Then, even the rumors stopped. Life moved on. Mine certainly did. I renovated the apartment, replaced the furniture, built a small memorial shelf for my mother. Slowly, the place became a home again. Linda became nothing more than an unpleasant memory. Until one winter afternoon. I was checking my mail when Harper approached me. She looked strangely uncomfortable. What is it? I asked. You remember Linda? I raised an eyebrow. Hard to forget. Harper hesitated, then handed me a newspaper clipping. I looked down and froze. Linda Carver, 67. Obituary. The article was short. Very short. No long list of grieving relatives. No glowing stories. No community achievements. Just a few dry lines. She had passed away alone in a subsidized apartment on the edge of town. A welfare worker had found her after neighbors reported a smell coming from the unit. No visitors. No family present. No funeral service requested. I stared at the clipping for a long moment. Hopeless sight. Sad, isn't it? I thought about it. The woman who had once strutted around the building acting like she owned everyone's lives. The woman who had terrorized neighbors for years. The woman who believed she could bully her way into getting whatever she wanted. And in the end, nothing. No crowd mourning her. No loyal friends. No grateful family. Just silence. The kind she had spent her entire life creating around herself. What happened to Carl? I asked. Passed away a few years earlier. And her son? Harper shook her head. Didn't come. For some reason, that hit harder than anything else. Linda had spent years claiming everything she did was for her son. The harassment, the greed, the demands for money, the excuses, all supposedly for family. Yet when the end came, family wasn't there. I folded the clipping and handed it back. Harper studied my face. Aren't you happy? I looked toward my apartment building, toward the balcony where my mother used to sit when she visited, toward the home I'd fought so hard to keep. Then I shook my head. No. And I meant it, because by then I had learned something. The opposite of hatred isn't revenge. It's indifference. Linda's punishment hadn't been the lawsuits, or the fines, or losing her apartment. It was that she spent the last years of her life with nothing left except the consequences of her own choices. No audience, no control, no one left to blame, just herself. I went upstairs, made a cup of tea, and placed fresh flowers beside my mother's memorial. Outside, the sun was setting. Inside, the apartment was quiet, peacefully quiet, the kind of quiet I'd wanted from the very beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I hadn't thought about Linda in months. That, more than anything else, was the real ending.